Imagine your parents leaving you with someone they thought they could trust, only for you to end up being tortured by the entire neighborhood. In July of 1965, Sylvia Likens, 16, and her younger sister Jenny, 15, were sent to live with a woman named Gertrude Beniszewski. Sylvia's parents were in desperate need of money and joined a traveling carnival. They promised Beniszewski $20 per week to take the girls in. Beniszewski already had 7 children of her own, so what's 2 more? Little did Sylvia's parents know this would be the last time they'd see their daughter alive. At first, the payments were on time and Sylvia and Jenny fit right in. Jenny had polio and wore a leg brace, so Sylvia did the chores for both of them and took care of her. The problems began when the payments for their room and board was late. Gertrude started beating the girls with paddles. One day in August, the girls were beaten 15 times because Gertrude's oldest daughter told her that the girls had overeaten that day. The abuse quickly escalated and poor young Sylvia became the focus of Gertrude's wrath. It's thought that Gertrude, who was 36 at the time, and her eldest daughter Paula were jealous of Sylvia's looks. Gertrude would starve Sylvia, followed by force feeding her until she'd vomit, then force her to eat the regurgitated contents. She once struck Sylvia so hard across the face that she broke her wrist, and then when the cast dried, she used it as a weapon. Slowly, Gertrude got her children to join in on the horrific abuse, followed by the neighborhood children. She encouraged them to use Sylvia as a dummy and practice martial arts on her. As more children joined in, Gertrude gained popularity and the violence became more extreme. At one point, she forced Sylvia to strip and use a glass bottle on herself in the middle of the living room for the neighborhood boys to watch. By the end of summer, Sylvia was forbidden from attending school and held captive at home. Because of the continuous cruelty, Sylvia had become incontinent. This angered Gertrude and she had Sylvia tied up naked in the basement on October 6th. Poor Sylvia was then subject to burns, beatings, verbal and physical sexual assault, and etc. She was also given very little to eat and forced to wet herself and use dark corners of the basement as a toilet. Word spread in the neighborhood amongst the children and they would pay 5 cents apiece to come and see Sylvia for themselves. The broken, scarred, and burned body of a teenager was a sight to behold for a curious child. Neighbors would later recount hearing screaming coming from the house until 3 in the morning at times, but in those days, no one wanted to intrude on others' household affairs, so no one came forward. Even Sylvia's older sister, who was told twice by her and Jenny about the abuse, thought that the sisters were exaggerating and did nothing about it. It seemed like everyone was turning a blind eye. However, for Sylvia, the horror kept escalating. Crime Fanatic Friday Part 2, the girl tortured by an entire neighborhood. After holding 16-year-old Sylvia Likens captive in the basement, Gertrude Beniszewski's heinous acts continued at a greater rate. Gertrude, her 7 children, and the neighborhood kids would help Gertrude restrain Sylvia as she received scalding hot baths and cuts, where Gertrude would rub salt into her wounds and sores. On October 23rd, they burned in her stomach with a hot needle, saying, "I'm a prostitute and proud of it." Once finished, Gertrude's 10-year-old daughter tried to brand Sylvia's left breast with a heated bolt that had an S on it. Sylvia knew that she was dying and even told her younger sister that she didn't have long to live. She tried to escape on October 25th but was caught by Gertrude before she made it to the door. The final day of Sylvia's life was different than the previous months. She was delirious and couldn't speak. She was fully incontinent and Gertrude's 12-year-old boy hosed her down with cold water while laughing at her. Even in her weakened state, she made one final attempt at escaping before Gertrude caught her at the basement door and stomped on her head. In her last hours, she was given a warm bubble bath, changed into clean clothes, and laid on the mattress. She closed her eyes and never opened them again. Days earlier, Gertrude forced Sylvia to write a letter claiming that she had run away and the boys from the neighborhood were her torturers. Her last attempt at deflecting any blame was to cover Sylvia's body in rubbing alcohol. When police arrived, Gertrude told them that Sylvia had returned home in her bloody and dying state and that she had been trying to nurse her. Everyone was questioned, but no one was talking. No one except Sylvia's 15-year-old sister, Jenny. She told police, "You get me out of here and I'll tell you everything." Gertrude, 5 of her children, and 5 of the neighborhood kids were all arrested for Sylvia's murder. Her autopsy showed 150 wounds, some down to the bone, and she had also bitten through her lips when she died, almost detaching it from her face. Gertrude and her eldest daughter Paula were sentenced to life in prison. However, both of them were released on parole later on. They both changed their names and went on to lead new lives, but Gertrude died in 1990 of lung cancer. Jenny, Sylvia's sister, went on to marry and have 2 children of her own. She spent years on medication due to anxiety from watching her sisters torture and murder. 2 movies have been made based on Sylvia Likens' story, one called An American Crime and the other called The Girl Next Door. That's actually how I heard about this case. Both movies are heartbreaking though, so please take caution when watching. Because of this case, if anyone sees any type of child abuse in the state of Indiana, they are required by law to report it. My boyfriend, 27, and I, 26, have been together for 2 years. He has a good heart and is normally rational, but his one issue is that he expects to come to me in every occasion no matter how big or small. He even went with me to my ex-boyfriend's funeral after days of begging. Now, my best friend got married a few days ago. It was very small and only close family and friends were invited. My boyfriend couldn't come because of the +1 rule. He pitched a hissy fit saying that my best friend had no respect for my relationship and was shocked when he learned that I was still going to attend. He told me that if he can't go, then I'm expected to not go as well. But that's my best friend and I had to respect her rules. He gave me an ultimatum, either we go together or I stay home with him. I ended up going because again, I respected my friend's rules. He was angry with me and kept calling me the entire 2-hour drive, then stopped. Later I got a text from his friend telling me that he, my boyfriend, got into an accident and was taken to the hospital. I freaked out and he gave me the address and I had to leave the wedding and told my friends why. I was crying the entire drive home and kept calling his friend but got no response. I arrived to the hospital and asked for my boyfriend and they texted and told me that he wasn't there. My anxiety reached 160% as I kept calling his friends one by one. I just went home and there he was, along with his friend. He saw me and said that he was sorry, but this was the only way he could get me to come home after I left him alone. After the initial shock, I just blew up yelling at him about lying and making me leave my friend's wedding and having me literally go to the hospital and freaking out because of him. I kicked his friend out and we got into an argument. He kept talking about how much I love him, thus I left, which is my own doing and not his, and that he was just trying to see if I really chose my friend's wedding over him. He then argued that my friend caused this and I shouldn't agree with her to exclude him. I said what he did was horrible and I called him horrible and then went to my room. It was awful because my friends kept calling to check in on him because they thought that he was really in the hospital. He said I overreacted and then I yelled at the wrong person. Did I go too far? Am I the asshole for yelling at him for making me leave my best friend's wedding? Storytime about how I got back at my cheating ex. Back in high school, I, now 25, had a long-term boyfriend who I became sexually active with. Legal age here is 16. However, his parents were in ignorant bliss, though I'd always assumed that they knew. They came across some suggestive messages and lost the plot. Literally printed them out and came to my house, so both families got involved and they insisted that we break up. My family was surprised at their response due to how long we'd been together, over a year at that point, but as adults agreed, it was their choice to make that rule for their son. Their son, however, took this opportunity to continue a secret relationship with me while proclaiming, unbeknownst to me, to be single to everyone else, including other girls. I was blissfully unaware thinking that we were still together but just couldn't tell his parents, until he slept with one of my classmates a few times and it got back to me. I publicly slapped him, embarrassing cringe in hindsight, but also called his dad and said calmly, if you don't think your son should be having sex, you may like to counsel him against sleeping with both me and other girls at the same time. It may result in more than just a slap from the next girl if he also refuses protection with her too. His dad went wild and had 100 questions. Apparently after the family intervention, my ex had convinced his parents that we just fooled around and didn't go all the way. So I told him it had been going on for months and that he used to sneak me into his bedroom at night too. They took literally every single thing except his mattress out of his bedroom. They also moved their wood pile so he couldn't climb down and to sneak out of his window. Our city was a major holder of sports events and he was a huge fan, would go to every game. The season had just started and he was banned from attending any of them despite having saved up for the tickets. He wasn't allowed to leave his house except for school until the end of the school year, which was 5 months. No phone, no internet. I only found out because he borrowed his friend's phone to text me and abused me for shattering his life. I guess it does seem pretty life-shattering at the age of 16 or 17. Then I dipped town anyway and left the wreckage behind, as my family was moving. Yeah, his parents were clearly overboard about it, but damn, it felt good to take away so much joy after all of his lies and cheating. This last week, me and my wife just finished a major project to redo our entire dining room. This included buying an incredibly fancy marble dining table and new dining chairs. My wife is a professional chef and has dreamed since she was a child of having a high-end dining room to host dinner parties in. This project has been one that's been on the back burner for a while now, and last year I got an unexpected bonus that I decided to use and make this dream a reality. Suffice to say, my wife is over the moon. To celebrate this, her parents, my 2 siblings, and my brother's wife are coming over for the dinner party my wife has dreamed of hosting since she was a child. This is all of our immediate family except for my wife's only sibling, her sister, and her husband. The reason for this is simple. My brother-in-law physically cannot attend the party as we have it planned. My brother-in-law is 500 plus pounds. To avoid the whole fat shaming conversation that I know this will bring up, I'll talk about why we didn't invite him. The chairs that we bought cannot support him, and even then, he is unable to sit upright due to his weight for long periods of time. He would require to either sit out in the living room on the couch or to sit in a medical chair that we cannot get into the home. It will not fit through our doors. Him sitting in there would literally defeat the point of hosting a dinner party for our new dining room. There's also the fact that this dinner party would consist of 7 smaller courses, something we know my brother-in-law would not be okay with. There have been incidents in the past where he harassed my wife over serving smaller portions in the past. This goes into a larger issue with him and food that I'm not going to bring up because I don't feel like arguing about it. With all of this in mind, when we sent out the invites, we excluded him from the list, but not her sister. When he called asking last night as to why he wasn't invited, I did not lie to him. It was because of his weight and his past actions regarding food and my wife. He lost his mind because we were excluding him because of his weight. He said this is unfair and that we were being bigots. I told him yes, this is about his weight. That this night is about my wife and being able to fulfill her childhood dream, not about accommodating him and his mobility and food issues. This has caused a shitstorm. My wife's sister is now calling me a fatphobic asshole and has gone on Facebook and publicly shamed me and my wife. While my wife and everyone attending the party has told me that we should just ignore it, my friends have told me that I'm a major asshole and an elitist for all of this. Am I the asshole for not inviting my 500 plus pound brother-in-law to our dinner party? I grew up as a fat kid, but when I got to college, I began taking control of my health and I lost 150 pounds. I had a personal trainer who is now my husband. He was a huge health nut to begin with and really kept me on track and held me accountable. I've been able to keep the weight off for 20 years and we're both giant health nuts. We have 3 kids. Our daughters are 12, 14, and 9. We've always been strict about health with them. They each have a workout machine in their room which they have to use for an hour before dinner, and if we walk in and they aren't on their machines, they get their phones and toys taken away. My 2 oldest girls have rebelled against this a lot. We've also been really strict with nutrition. We never had anything but fruits, veggies, and lean meats in our home, not even bread. At birthday parties, we took them home as soon as the cake and pizza came out, never took them trick-or-treating for Halloween, and had teachers send them to different rooms when they had class parties with food. We also told their friends' parents not to feed them junk. I'll admit, we definitely sheltered them from junk food in fear that they grow up unhealthy. People thought we were ridiculous for the way we raised our kids, and we were warned about them having eating disorders, but we thought we were doing what was best, and everyone was being ridiculous. 3 months ago, we found out our oldest daughters, who go to the same middle school, were sneaking food at vending machines from school with their allowance cash. My husband found out about this from hearing the snacks in their backpacks and had a long talk with them about the dangers of eating those snacks and took the snacks and their money. I heard him talking to them and he was gentle and calm about it, but both girls ended up in tears. Recently, we got a call from our 12-year-old daughter's school counselor. Apparently, she's been chewing up her food and then spitting it out and making herself throw up in the bathroom when she ate lunch. They also talked to me about my 14-year-old who said that lately she's been skipping breakfast and lunch a few times a week for the past couple years because she was scared we would be mad at her when she ate. The counselor was not happy with me and recommended a treatment place for eating disorders. I feel like absolute shit. Like we've caused our daughters to have eating disorders and have to look out for signs for a 9-year-old. I called my mom for help and instead she berated me and called me a piece of shit mom, which was the last thing that I needed to hear. My parents are taking my girls for a couple days while I get everything together and set things up with the eating disorder treatment place for when they come back. I don't know what to do. I feel proud that I didn't raise my kids with junk food addiction and I put their health before their tears about not eating pizza, but now it's come at a price. I've been inconsolable and my husband and I aren't talking right now as we don't know what to do. My wife is a cancer patient. She unfortunately started losing her hair due to chemotherapy and she's been incredibly insecure about it, her lack of hair in particular. She got a wig and started wearing it. I don't mind it. I 100% support her since she only wears it around family and friends. Now my sister lost her apartment after a messy divorce and moved in with her twin daughter, 16, almost a month ago. Things have been going well except for my niece's constant remarks about my wife's wig. They got so hung up on it and kept asking lots of questions about it. They asked to take turns trying it on, suggested that they straighten it with their straightener and so on, which was exhausting. They even pressured to see her without it, but my wife was uncomfortable and refused. Yesterday, I got home and found that my wife is locking herself in the bedroom and crying. I asked her what happened. She told me that she woke up and didn't find her wig and then discovered that my nieces took it and hid it and urged her to come out so that they could see her without it. My wife repeatedly asked them to give it back, but they started laughing and recording. My wife had to lock the door to keep the distance because they didn't stop. I was fuming and went to the kitchen and confronted them. They acted confused, but I was able to get the wig back. I lashed out telling them that they humiliated my wife and embarrassed her by taking her wig. They said it was just a lighthearted prank, which made me go off on them. My sister got involved and said that my wife was just being sensitive and the girls were just curious to see her without her wig, but she overreacted. I told her that her daughters were recording her. She saw nothing wrong in it and said that I overreacted as well. I lost it on her too and told her that she and my nieces are no longer welcome to stay at my home and they needed to leave. I later let them know about the eviction since they thought I wasn't being serious, but they started crying and begging that I let it go. However, my wife is no longer comfortable around them after what they did. My sister called our elderly dad and he begged that I let him stay and insisted my nieces were just acting like typical teenagers. He offered to speak to my wife, but I declined. They've been begging that I change my mind, but I kept refusing. Am I the asshole for evicting my sister and her daughters after they hid my wife's wig and embarrassed her? My wife and I had our first child around 2 months ago. She was home isolated during her entire pregnancy after the 6-month mark because of some pregnancy complications. We had also agreed that the first 2 months after birth, our parents and siblings would be the only ones allowed to visit and see the baby, and our friends and the rest of the relatives could wait. As soon as the baby turned 2 months, my wife started trying to get back into her social life again. Sometimes she'd bring the baby with her, but sometimes she'd expect me to babysit. Whenever I couldn't babysit, she'd call her mom and ask her if she could care for the baby for a few hours. My wife's a great mom and she truly cares for our baby, but it's frustrating how she feels the need to go out the entire time. One day while she was out shopping with a friend of hers, I was babysitting the kid and my mom visited me and asked where my wife was. I told her that she's out with a friend. My mom got very mad about how my wife went out and she told me that I have no backbone for not calling her out and telling her to stay home with the baby. I told my mom that I'd handle it. My mom waited until my wife got back home and she started scolding her. It wasn't a proud moment of me and I really didn't want my mom to get involved, but my wife needed to hear from someone else too. My mom told my wife that she's irresponsible and that she should cut down the meetings with her friends and stay home to care for the kid as a proper mother would. My wife tried to defend herself by saying that I was always out with my friends both during her pregnancy and after she gave birth, but both I and my mom tried to explain how me going out is not the same as her going out. My mom told her that the little walks and coffee hangouts with her friends are over and that she better get used to the fact that her social life will now be limited. It sucks, but that's how it is. I agreed with my mother on all that and my wife is not speaking to me for days. She even sleeps in the guest room now and took the baby's crib there as well. She'll only cook for herself and the baby and not for me. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law have texted me saying I was a huge asshole for this and so was my mom, so I shouldn't be surprised if my wife is acting like that towards me. Am I the asshole for siding with my mother when she and my wife got into an argument?